Hello and welcome to Sampson Judo. Today we're going to talk about back patches and specifically how to take one off. So for those of you that are unaware, for certain judo competitions, athletes are required to wear a back patch, which normally has their name and their country code. A good example is if you look at the Olympics or any major IJF event, you'll always see someone's a judoka with a patch on their back, which has their surname as well as their country code. So these have to be sewn onto the judogi way back when they used to be ironed on sometimes, but now they're sewn on. This is of course more robust, so they don't get ripped off when people are taking kumikata. They also have to be sewn on in a very specific way to pass judogi control and also just to make sure that they actually stay on in the fight. But sometimes there's a situation where you might want to have to take one off. It could be that you need to move it from one judogi to another and you don't have enough time to get the new back patches delivered before your event. Maybe it's a last minute call up. Maybe it's that you went to a certain event that had a back patch. For example, in the UK, we have the Southend International, which has its own specific back patch. Maybe you want to take that off because you don't want it in judogi anymore, but you want to take it off in such a way that it's maintained, so you can put it in a scrapbook or something like that. But for whatever the reason, you need to take your back patch off. So I'm going to talk about the way I personally like to do it, and it's the way that I've found to be the most successful in reusing back patches, should you have to. So for my specific example, I took my my judogi to a dry cleaners with a back patch, and they didn't do a very good job, which unfortunately means that it's not going to pass judogi control when I go to a competition in a couple of weeks. So I need to take it off and put it onto, I've actually ordered new back patches, so I'm just going to take it off, but I'm going to use the same judogi and just put new back patches on. But I thought it'd be a good time to talk about how I like to take them off. So this is my gi at the moment. So yes, I know we're a traditional judo channel, but we do also enter some IJF events as well. I'm specifically focused on IJF events at this particular moment in my career. So I do sometimes have to wear a blue judogi, much to my dad's disapproval, but here we are. But you can, I don't know if you can see in the video, but the bottom is quite wonky. It's also quite uneven on either side. It's not quite showing in the video, but just take my word for it that it's not going to pass judogi control. So if you go to a competition, sometimes they will give you a spare judogi which you can use, but in some cases, basically the organizer isn't obliged to give a spare judogi. So if I turn up to this competition with this judogi and I don't have a spare one, and the organizer doesn't have a spare one, there's a good chance that I could be withdrawn from the competition. So I don't want to take that chance. So I want to make sure that I go with all my kit looking good and all under regulation. So how do I take this off? So there's of course loads of different methods. Everyone has their own one. You can go straight at it with scissors and then cut it off and just use brute force to take it off. But as I said, sometimes we want to reuse these, or we want to put them in a scrapbook and keep them as a little memento. So the most common way that people use is they'll use one of these, which is a small tool, which is sold in a lot of sewing kits, or at least in sewing shops. And it's got this little hook. And what people do is you kind of dig in, not into the material itself, but you kind of hook underneath the stitch, and it's a little bit sharp at the top, and you kind of use a little bit of force, and you can kind of flip the stitches off. So you'd kind of go in and slowly pick each stitch away, pull it out with your hands, and slowly the patch will come off. This is effective and it can work. Personally, I find it a little bit slow because this little blade here isn't that sharp, and it requires a little bit of force to actually flip the stitches off, which leaves a little bit of room for error, because if you're using quite a lot of force, especially as you get, there's a lot of stitches in these, as you slowly get to the end, you might start getting tired, your concentration goes, and it leaves you with a little bit of room to potentially rip the patch, which of course isn't what we want if we want to reuse the patch or keep it nice and looking nice at least. So what I personally prefer to use, I prefer to use a razor. So this is just a standard razor which you put into like when what people use to shave their face. The reason I like this is because it's very sharp, which means that as soon as I touch the threads, they tend to just cut, and then I can pull it away nice and easy. Because they're so sharp, it means I don't have to use so much force, which reduces the chance of me pulling a little bit too hard and accidentally tearing the back patch. Now, of course, the razor, as you can see, it's sharp all down this edge, and even these edges, although they're not designed for cutting, they are quite sharp. So it's a little bit dangerous. I would recommend using gloves if you're going to use it, or if you're a little bit younger, maybe ask someone who's maybe ask an adult who can do it for you. So you have to be very, very careful if you're using a razor. But for me, like I said, I do find this the most effective technique, but let's say it's a little bit dodgy because, as I said, the razors are very, very sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of zoom into the judogi, show you how I show you how I get started with this, and then show you the end result afterwards. Okay, so now you can see the judogi nice and close, and you can start to see the messy stitching up close and personal. So I'm going to show you how you can use the unpicker to do this. So from here, what you can do is you can start looking for loops. So hook the unpicker in a loop like that. Then all you'll do is you'll just flick it up like that, and you hear the little pop, and that's just where the stitch is breaking. So you keep going through. Once you've done the first one, generally they just kind of flick out like so, and you can also go underneath here, and you can see the kind of stitches underneath, and you can also start flicking them out from there. So it's a little bit of a slow job, just flicking it out, moving over to the next one, flicking it out, next one, flicking it out. So you can see now the stitch is coming undone, and the kind of more you go, the easier it does become. So there you are, in just a few seconds you can see the gi is starting to come away, the patch is starting to come away from the gi, and like I said, it just comes a little bit easier. So that's method number one, using the unpicker. But method number two is using the razor, which is my preferred method. Normally you have to get a little bit closer to the gi to do this, because the area to kind of cut is much, much thinner. So I'm going to try my best to show it on the camera. I've got a glove on as well, just to protect my fingers. I did cut myself recently doing this. Had to tape up my hands while I was doing some randori because I was bleeding all over everyone. So let's try and avoid that today by using some gloves on my hands just to protect myself. So it's a little bit harder to get started with the razor, but once you're started, I think it's a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find a stitch that's kind of sticking out. So you can see it there, there's one sticking out. And then I'll create a cut. Then I'll start pulling, cutting. From there, it's coming up. Cut, keep cutting. You can see, you kind of get yourself on a bit of a roll here, where once you've got it open, you can almost cut through quite a few, just like that. You see it's just coming away, nice and easy. It starts coming away, really, really nice and easy. So hopefully you can see there that using the razor is just that a little bit faster, because you've got stitches all the way down around the edges. You've got all these that go across to the other side, and of course you've got the cross over your name and country. So that's just a quick example of how each method works. I'm going to go away, I'm going to take the rest of this off, and then show you how it looks afterwards. So here you can see the final result. You can see the patch is completely off, and you can see the patch is relatively in good condition. In some cases, this might be able to be reused, but at the very least, it could be stored in a scrapbook, framed, or just kept somewhere if you did want to keep the patch as a memento. So now the gi is ready for a new patch to be put onto it.